We're on a search for one of the greatest powers ever known.
Burnham and her crew fight for the future of the Federation.
I have to go in there.
In the action-packed series finale
Discovery is running out of time.
of Star Trek Discovery. Well, friends, here we are at the final episode of the final season of Star Trek Discovery. This is Season 5, Episode 10, entitled Life Itself. Now, there will be spoilers for just everything in this video, so if you don't want those, check back after you've seen all of it. You've been warned. Let's crack into it. So as I just mentioned, this is not just the season finale, it is the series finale. So it has a huge kind of weight on its shoulder to try to wrap everything up to give us a satisfactory closing on the storyline for this season, our characters in general, all of that stuff, and it just had a lot of that to cover, even though they didn't know it was the end of the road when they went into filming this season. Sadly, I have to say there was a lot still left on the table, and I think they played some of it a bit too safe. Now, that's not to say I didn't appreciate a heck of a lot of what was in this episode. I just felt like some of the choices weren't necessarily up to the grandiose level I would have liked them to be for the end of this series. Now, granted, this is one show that has been praised or criticized from the very beginning for basically being the Michael Burnham show, to the exclusion of all the other characters and all the other plot lines, save a couple. Maybe you could throw Saru in there as another co-lead, although it definitely is pretty much centered around the journey of Michael Burnham from that very first episode to now. Following along in that vein, this episode very much wrapped things up, or at least gave us the most heartfelt moments and the most closure and the most follow-through on the Michael Burnham character. This was in essence a series finale of Michael Burnham, a heck of a lot more than a series finale of Star Trek Discovery. And I don't necessarily just mean that from the end portion of the episode, but that's definitely a huge factor in there. Just the overall plot line of this story is that she is the, what did they call it? The steward of this progenitor technology. She is the one given the choice for the course of the future of this galaxy. She is entrusted with and charged with the power of, I almost said the power of the progenitors, but let's take a little side tangent and discuss that, because as we learn in this episode, the progenitors did not create this technology.
Those were all worlds you created.
No, we found them here.
So I do want to touch on something that I've seen going around out there saying that, well, this kind of flies in the face of the chase by confirming the progenitors didn't actually seed life throughout the galaxy. No, that's not necessarily correct. That is not what was said in the episode. They did still seed life. They just didn't create the technology or the portals in which to do this, but they still went ahead and spread their genetic material to create us bipedal or humanoid type species out there. So they still followed through on all of the things they said in the chase, up to the fact that they were the only species that were kind of like them. They were lonely. They decided to try and increase the biodiversity of the galaxy, all of that stuff. It still holds true. It just adds another layer of mystery on top of it, and that's something I'm actually somewhat glad they did. Instead of peeling back the grand mystery and giving us a revelation of who this culture was, why they did the things they did, we kind of got a little bit more clarity on who and what the progenitors are. Not so much that we really know anything about them, but to add that extra mystery of they were just this bumbling race that came up and eventually evolved to a point where they found this mysterious kind of realm and this really, really out there technology that exists in the back rooms of reality in some sort of subspace pocket that allows you to portal to worlds and other realms out there. That was very intriguing. It kind of was very reminiscent of a lot of things. Definitely felt a little bit like the whole Mass Effect thing, maybe a bit of Babylon 5 in there. I think it was actually kind of hearkening to the Preserver storyline from the Shatnerverse novels. Although I haven't read them in so long, I was just getting kind of vibes of that. Even though the Preservers and the Progenitors in this show, in Alpha Canon, are not directly linked, a lot of people definitely assume they are. So it kind of was feeding on all of those elements to show us that there is this grand cycle going on, at least in our galaxy. We don't really know about anywhere outside of the galaxy, so for all we know, our galaxy is just this one little hub in a universe-spanning program or something where they've been seeding different types of life. So this was just maybe a one-stop shop, and these little stations that are set up are kind of a cross between the Mass Effect relays in Mass Effect and something like, I don't know, the monoliths in 2001, but just amped up to a whole other degree. Now, the choice made at the end of the episode for Michael to destroy the technology, I don't think was 100% confirmed to be a destruction of the technology.
In safeguarding this technology, placing it beyond the event horizon, we trust that what the progenitors created for us is enough.
I don't think that's necessarily the case, because in at least my opinion, I believe that this portal was just the entranceway or the gateway into this other realm. So they just destroyed the way in. There must be other ways in out there, because we know that inside this liminal space backroom structure, there were portals to all of the worlds that were seeded with life. And I don't know for sure if these portals were through time. So when Michael and Maul were kind of fighting and falling into different various planetary scapes, I don't know if they were falling back in time to the point of that seeding of life to creation, or if these portals are directly linked to these planets in current day. And if that's the case, that's definitely kind of intriguing as well. Not that we'll probably ever explore that again, but that definitely leaves a bit of mystery out there. And while we're discussing the portals, I'm very happy they didn't link these people to the Iconians, even though there was a ready-built explanation for, oh, they both use this portal technology. I still think there might be a link. However, these progenitors were supposed to be, 4 billion years old, and the Iconians are roughly 200,000 years old. That's a heck of a time differential. I think it's much more likely that the Iconians either stumbled upon similar technology from the Ancient Ones, or whatever you want to call them, and either retrofitted it or kind of used it to their own means, or they just kind of found some portals that were pre-existing and just used them. Either way, I do like the fact that they're kind of maybe connected, but they're not the same thing. They just utilize something that was already pre-existing. Now, this is something I both liked and disliked to certain extents. The fact that this progenitor technology could not bring somebody back from the dead, I 100% am on board with that, because had it had this power to resurrect people for all intents and purposes, that would have raised so many more questions as far as, the nature of a soul and the afterlife and things like that, which I don't think this show was equipped to answer in such a limited time frame, let alone any show could really give that a satisfactory answer. So I'm glad they didn't utilize this power, but that left the whole Locke and Maul storyline a bit just kind of cut off at the knees, with no real emotional catharsis outside of that one little tiny scene between Michael and Maul where she's like, nope, there's nothing here that can bring him back, and Maul's just like, I really, really wanted a heck of a lot more of an emotional resolution to that, whether it's good or bad. It just kind of seemed like it ended, and then the rest of the story was on Michael's decision with what to do with this technology. Similarly, there was no real wrap-up with the whole Breen storyline. Now, I know we didn't necessarily need that, but to bring them into this, establish Locke as this scion of the Breen, they're warring over him, he gets killed, and then the only resolution in this episode is Saru talks them down in an unaffiliated moment of the episode, and the ones that we were following, the ones that Maul had taken over, were spore drive weaponed to the galactic barrier. Along a similar vein to the Breen storyline lacking any sort of resolution comes a lot of the other characters and storylines lacking any real wrap-up or any sort of permanence to their endings as far as anything goes. Reese wasn't promoted. None of the side characters were given another ship, another crew. We didn't see what happened to Raynor. Does he stay as first officer of the Discovery? Does Michael immediately get promoted to admiral and leave so he takes over? What happens with Reese? Where's the ISS Mirror Universe Enterprise? We got to see Owo and Detmer and Reno, even though she was in the credits, non-speaking roles kind of thrown in a very hastily shot last scene where they were all kind of hugging and saying goodbye to each other when Michael was reminiscing. So it just lacked any sort of feeling of forward momentum for anyone in the storyline outside of Burnham and her family, because she gets back with Book, and as we see towards the end, she has a son who has now become a captain.
I want them to be inspired, you know?
So we get a lot of emotional follow-through on them, and then a very minor bit with Saru and Tarina, who have a very brief wedding scene, which I'm also going to go ahead and assume was part of the reshoots, and this was the part that made Saru's actor, Doug Jones, cry, which I guess makes it even a little bit more disappointing, but I have to imagine, and I know I've rambled a lot longer on this one point than I meant to, this is because they're leaving all of these stories open for Academy. Now, we had a direct reference to Academy here where Tilly mentioned something about implementing a mentorship program, which is probably just a backdoor way of saying we're going to bring in as many Discovery characters, side characters, main characters, whoever as we can to act as these mentors, probably coupled with my theory of bringing in holographic recreations of legacy Star Trek actors, but that remains to be seen. The other thing that really annoyed me about this time skip to the future of Michael Burnham and her son, not that it's necessarily any fault of the episode, they finally designed a new uniform and a new comm badge design that we're probably never going to see again, unless these are just uniforms that are left over from Academy and they were just using them here in the reshoots. If that's the case, I'm cautiously optimistic because I actually really like these uniforms, at least for the brief amount of screen time they actually got. So fingers crossed it's not just another wasted amount of time and effort and money on a one-shot uniform that's never going to be used again. There were also a couple other storylines in here that feels like they just kind of gave it a snappy blink and you miss it explanation, probably because the exploration of this was planned for season 6, which got canned. That's the Culber storyline, dealing with his whole spirituality and the voice inside of his head and all of that stuff, his mortality. It was just kind of, oh, he was able to access one of Janal's memories, and suddenly now he's at peace with himself and who he is. I don't necessarily hate that fact. I have to imagine he was going to come to that revelation eventually anyway. It just kind of was like thrown in here because they didn't have time to actively explore that, which also left Stamets in this entire season and a little bit Adira kind of floundering with no real endpoint for them. And of course, the other big one, who the heck is Kovich and what is he doing here? Well, of course, it is revealed in this episode that
Captain Michael Burnham, USS Discovery.
A long time ago, I was known as Wesley Crusher.
All kidding aside.
Agent Daniels, USS Enterprise.
That's right, the same Daniels from Enterprise. Now, kudos to him. Through all the time travel shenanigans he's had, he grew back a lot of hair. So I'm definitely hoping that holds true for a lot of people. I don't hate this revelation. It's not necessarily a fresh one. I saw a lot of people were speculating that way back early on when he first came on the scene, either that or he was future guy from Enterprise. So to have that connection is nice. It would be a little bit more, I don't know, satisfactory if we got any sort of hint or indication as to what he was up to between now and then, aside from just vague hints about time travel, the temporal accord, and Giorgio's whole cascade failure thing, what was that, 2 seasons ago? I just feel like that was something that was planned to be explained in a lot more length in a future season. And I guess the last thing I'll talk about here is the Calypso connection at the very end. They send off the Discovery A into the future to meet its destiny in the short trek Calypso. Now, they went out of their way in this episode here at the very end to retroactively fix a potential glaring mistake. So when Calypso took place, it was before the Discovery jumped to the future and had all the new refits and got the detachable nacelles, got the A tacked on. They went out of their way in this episode to scrub the A from the front of it and kind of defit the Discovery back to its original state, at least a heck of a lot more so than it had been. And there's a lot of people out there that are seemingly misunderstanding this, thinking that the scene was showcasing them painting the A on it and then going forward to say that, oh, there was a continuity error because right after they painted the A on, the next CGI model of the ship didn't have the A. Ha ha ha, production error. No, this was a, I guess, deep cut, you could say, connection to Calypso. I thought a lot of people out there were calling for this Calypso connection, but it seems like there's also an equal amount of people that had no remembrance of Calypso or had forgotten or maybe never even watched the short treks. So to have that very end scene tacked on there was great. I've been wanting a Calypso wrap-up for a long time, but it seems like there might have been a slightly better way to do it to remind other people about Calypso, maybe even tack something on to that previously on at the beginning of the episode, although it was very long to begin with. I just feel like there might be some people out there missing that entire storyline and just being completely confused by this red directive of going off to meet Kraft in 1,000 years or whatever happens there, which is kind of a sobering thought if you think of it, because Kraft's timeline in the short trek was not great. So does that mean the galaxy is going to go to hell again in the next few hundred years? I hope not, but that's kind of a sour note to leave things on. There was a lot in this episode. Overall, I feel a little underwhelmed with the resolution of specifically the entire point of this season being the progenitor technology, but for a wrap-up of the Michael Burnham journey, I think they did a pretty good emotional job in this episode to kind of wrap up that weight, and for the most part, any of the other Discovery characters still have potential to pop up in Academy. I think had that show not been greenlit, had they not known they were going to continue on in this time frame, they may have done a more permanent wrap up with those characters. So I'm definitely hoping they don't let all that potential go to waste by not utilizing any of that in Academy when they did have a chance to more adequately wrap it up right here in this episode. What did you think of this episode? What do you think of the fact that Discovery's over now? And do you think we'll see any of these characters in the future? Whatever you think, leave all that down below. Like, share, subscribe to all the YouTube things. But until next time...
Last time, then. Let's fly.